Welcome to A Matter of Perspective. I'm Judge Derwin Webb, coming to you from the Fraser History Museum. We are lucky enough to have on our show today Dr. Wayne Tuckson. Dr. Tuckson, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon to you, Judge.
Man, let's take us back. I want to thank you for being on the show, first of all, but we have a great history. We have a good friendship that established not too far. I guess it was about 3 years ago when I met you at the Cancer Society.
Yeah, it was one of the things as a fundraiser, and also they were honoring some of their workers. And my wife was a volunteer with the American Cancer Society here, and that's when I met you. And I think you were running. You had an election coming up there for judge, and that's when we first met.
Well, I was already a judge, but I had to run to keep my seat.
That's what.
And I'd never forget. We had a conversation, and you said to me, you know what, I want to have a fundraiser for you. Yeah. And you called me, and we became friends. I had a fundraiser at your house, and we've been good friends ever since then. So I appreciate you trusting me, and I appreciate you being on the show today.
Well, I must admit, I admire the work that you do. You not only sit behind the bench, but you get out from the bench, and you get out into the community, and you follow up into the schools and places with the kids. You go that extra step, and I feel that if somebody's going to go that extra step, I got to be there with them if they're going to do it.
Well, I appreciate that. And Doc, I will tell you this, I'm missing it right now. COVID-19 has me stuck in the house, stuck at the courthouse, not being able to go out and do some of the stuff I would normally do. But as a doctor, what do you see? I know that you've been on KAT, you've had a radio show, you've talked about COVID-19. What are you seeing today? Kind of take us through the beginning when you first start talking about it and where we are today and where you think we're going, actually.
Let's just take a step back. I think the most important thing you've done is you have recognized the reality of the situation of COVID-19. There are still some people out here who don't believe that COVID-19 is real. I just don't get it. I really, really don't understand it. But we like to talk in terms of COVID-19 and the 1918 Spanish flu. You hear that comparison a lot. There are a lot of people who had Spanish flu, but if you look at the mortality rate, about 1% or a little bit more of people who had Spanish flu died from that, and still large numbers. Now, when you look at COVID-19, you're running at mortality rates of 3 to 4%. That is a huge, huge difference. Now, if you take just the average flu, you're talking about a mortality rate under 1%. So when you look at the numbers of death or potential deaths from COVID-19, it's exponentially increased. So this is a serious, serious disease. The next thing is how contagious it is. The problem, most people who have flu or something, they pass it on to someone else when they start having coughs, sneezes, or whatever. With COVID-19, about 30 to 40% of the people who are infected but without symptoms are passing on the disease to somebody else. So you can have the disease, be asymptomatic, and pass it on to somebody else. So you may try to say, okay, well, I'll wear a mask if I have a cough or a sneeze. But if I don't have one, I'm not going to wear a mask. Well, the problem is you still may be able to pass the disease on to somebody else. So, and again, I go back to this problem. This is such a real disease that there's some simple things that we can do to try to control it.
Please tell us, because I believe people are kind of clueless as to what to do right now.
No, and it requires adults making adult decisions based upon science that we know. Number one, you have to have a national approach to the disease. Having a patchwork kind of thing where we're going to do one thing in one city, one thing in one state, one thing in one region, it doesn't work. This is and that's the definition of pandemic. It to involve all. The whole country, the whole world is infected by this thing and is at risk. So we have to have a consensus on how we're going to handle things. I do think that way our Governor Beshear has done in his approach to handling COVID-19 has been the right approach. Number one, everyone ought to wear a mask. Now, I should wear a mask because if I have something, I'm going to decrease the chances of passing something on to you. You're wearing a mask, and the odd chance that I may have something, further decreasing your chances. And also, if you have something, you're trying to mitigate my catching something from you. So it works both ways. I'm protecting myself, but I'm also protecting you. That's number one. Number two, social distancing. This whole concept of being 6 feet away is based on how far do droplets spread. In fact, we may need to be a little bit further than 6 weeks, to be honest about it, but at minimum 6 feet, so that we're not contaminating one another. We have to shut things down. Now, yes, that does cause significant economic hardships to some people. We need to compensate people for those hardships. But the idea that we're going to have bars open, The idea is that we're going to gather in a sports arena and expect that no one's going to come out of this thing catching COVID-19, that's absurd. Every time we look at people who violate the common sense things of gatherings more than 10 people, for instance, there was just a wedding up in Maine. And after that gathering of Maine, 100 people who did not attend the wedding were COVID-19 positive, and 7 people who did not attend that wedding, and only new people who went to the wedding died from COVID-19. So it's, that we have got to have a common sense approach and say, hey, there are things that we can't do. This concept of, well, it's my individual liberty. You can't tell me I have to wear a mask. You can't tell me I can't go out to have a drink or gather with my friends. No, just like we say people have to wear a seatbelt to prevent injuries in car accidents, the same thing here. We have to have a common sense approach to taking care of ourselves.
Okay, let me ask you this question. I like to go to the park a lot, and I will walk around and try to get some exercise in. What about wearing a mask there? Should I be wearing a mask while I'm outside just walking in the open air, or what about something like that?
And that's a real good point. If it's just you, do you need to wear a mask? No, especially if you're maintaining distance when you're outside. So you maintain that 6 to 8, 12 feet distance. You're a big black guy, so people can stay away from you anyway. So we ain't got to worry about that being close to you. But in general, though, yes, you want to maintain. So if you're not wearing that mask then, but if you're in a crowd of people, or you see you're about to bunch up, put the mask on, just to be on the safe side. Again, you can protect them, but more importantly, you may be protecting yourself from them, that you're not catching something they have. So yeah, it's okay to go out and park, but still you see people trying to push the limit of things. Well, my exercise group is going to get together. There's just 12 of us, and we're going to be outside. No. 10 or less, 6 feet apart distance. Let's be honest about it. Let's not try to cheat or game the system. So no, you're okay. And I encourage it that people should still get out there, because you go crazy being indoors all the time.
Okay, now you talked about athletic events. What about, for example, there are some teams that are still having events. What about fans that are considering going to those events to support their local team? Is there a way to do it safely?
No.
Okay.
Short answer, no. Now, can you do it and mitigate the risk? Yes. You have to have so much space around everybody that it almost doesn't make sense for the venue to have the game. You get a better view of the whole thing at home on TV. These games are going to be televised, so go ahead and do it that way. I'm a huge college football fan. Make no mistake, I love college football and I love high school football. There is no way I am going anywhere near one of those stadiums right now. And I think we are doing a tremendous disservice to the young men and women who we're sitting there saying, we want you to go out there on that field or on the court and play the game so that we can sit back and watch. You're going to take all the risk. We're going to get all the benefit. And the benefits in the form of the schools are going to be cash payments, and the benefit for those of us sitting at home and the enjoyment of the game. But at what price? I always ask, it's going to be whose wealth at whose cost of health. I'll say this because there was a study that came out of Penn State University, Doc looking at the athletes. 30% of athletes, and these were football players in particular, who tested positive for COVID-19 but did not have any symptoms of the disease had myocarditis. They had inflammation of the heart. So what does that mean? Well, it may pass and they may not have any other problem. But maybe when they turn 45 or 50, they start developing heart failure because their heart has already been damaged. Who's going to pay for that? Are they going to turn around and tell the school, hey, I went out there and played football for you, and now I have a bad heart? The school's going to say, hey, man, it's not us.
Right.
It's not our responsibility. So I am concerned with how we are using these young athletes, and in particularly African-American athletes. Because you notice the Ivy Leagues shut down. Division III shut down. Division II shut down. And a lot of what used to be called the 1AA, with the football championship series, they shut down, though some of them are starting to come back. It's the Big Five where you have this discussion about coming out. And that's where the big money is also.
Well, let me ask you, is there a way for it to be safe? Like for example, the NBA bubble. They seem to be doing well. Everyone's in the bubble. Everyone gets tested. Is there a way to do it safely and still be able to be out there? Because I'm of the belief that athletes are at risk anytime they go out there and do something like this. But Seems to be some science that says that it is possible to have it and do it safely. So what are your thoughts on like the NBA bubble and how things are going that way as compared to college athletics?
If college football can do it the way the NBA has done it, I'm all for it. Go ahead and do it. But the colleges have said our campuses aren't safe enough for the students to come back.
Exactly.
Therefore, why is it safe enough for those athletes to come back? That makes no sense to me whatsoever.
Right.
The only thing you're telling me that this is a commodity that we're going to use and we're going to ride this commodity to make money for good old alma mater. No, that's not fair.
Well, let me ask you this. Athletics aside, where do you think this is going to go? Now, we talked about the pandemic back in 1918. I believe it lasts for a couple of years,
Yes, sir.
really. So we are in first stage of 2020. We're in the first stages of it.
Mm-hmm.
If our behavior doesn't change, will this just, I'm going to give you a 45 statement, it's just going to mysteriously disappear, or are we in for something longer because we are not taking the appropriate measures for it to go away the way it should?
When we take politics out of this and we listen to the scientists, the infectious disease docs, et cetera, clearly this is going to be around for a while. Will we ever get rid of it? Maybe not. But it may get to the point like we have any other flu or any other any other acute illnesses that keep coming back on a seasonal basis. But this particular episode, where we are right now, is going to be with us until 2021, well into 2021, so that we may even still have the discussion about what do we do about gatherings of large groups, sporting events, et cetera, even then. The things that can save us, and if you look at the countries which were able to control the spread of the disease so that they could get back to a, quote, normal, which would include kids going back to school, they shut down the whole country. Everybody wore a mask. They had the distancing. Remember, they didn't have any vaccines. They did not have any medications. That's what they did. They limited travel around from an area of high concentration of disease to a low concentration. They said, no, we're not going to have that. We're shutting this whole thing down. When they did that, the incidences dropped. And as they got good control on everything, they slowly started opening up the countries back in. That's why we see what's happening in Europe and parts of Asia are so distinct from what we are doing here in the United States. We just have this, God knows what kind of thing we have going on. But yet, if you look at two states here in the United States, Alaska and Hawaii, and you can use those two because they're both relatively isolated in terms of how you're going to get there. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're just not going to walk to Hawaii, and you're not going to walk up to Alaska either. Alaska and Hawaii both shut down their things, but Hawaii shut theirs down first. And they said, anybody coming in, you got to be quarantined. And they were serious about that. Alaska said, okay, we're going to have a little bit of quarantine. We're going to do this. We're going to shut down. Their numbers were low. Then all of a sudden they said, but we got to get back to business. Let's open the state back up. Their incidence for COVID-19 went up. Hawaii's has remained low. And that's the big difference. You have to have timing on this sort of thing. When to pull the trigger, when not to pull the trigger. And it takes somebody like, again, I go back to our governor. He's taken a lot of heat. But if you look at the numbers we have here in Kentucky compared to Tennessee, Indiana, Ohio, Illinois, Missouri, West Virginia, we're miles ahead. Mm-hmm. Miles ahead. And we still got stuff to do, but we're so much better.
Okay, let's be honest. How's it affecting us, people of color, people who are like us?
Well, we are taking a beating. What COVID-19 has demonstrated that when it comes to healthcare, we're always at the end of the wagon. Mm-hmm. You know, the dog may get a cold, or dog may have diarrhea, but we're the ones that are going to have to deal with the crap.
Well,
you know,
I always say that when some people catch the cold, we catch the flu.
And that's exactly what's happening here. And part of the reason is, who are the people that were most likely to be affected by COVID-19? Number one, they tend to be people who are older, initially now, serious impacts. They tend to be older. Number two, they lived in multi-family dwellings or very close to one another. Three, they often had comorbid or multiple medical conditions in addition to just getting the COVID-19 thing. And then you look at the jobs that they tended to have. There were these people who were so-called essential workers. That was the most absurd term I ever heard in my life. It's patronizing. What you're saying to those people who are so-called essential workers is that we need you to go to work so I can maintain my lifestyle, which is what it was. You know, you look at the food packers. Okay, they had one of the highest incidences of COVID-19 positivity of almost any other workers. You look at bus drivers. Look at the number of bus drivers who caught COVID-19 just from exposure to people getting on the bus. Then you have people working in the hotels, grocery stores, other service industries. And who tend to work those kinds of jobs? Well, in the case of African Americans, we have much higher. But then you have folks at other lower ends of the social economic scale are suffering just as much, and not to mention Hispanic folks too. So to answer your question, African Americans disproportionately caught the brunt of COVID-19. Plus, when you add the other thing, this whole concept, well, okay, we'll work from home. Well, to my knowledge, if you're working the cashier at Kroger, you can't do that from home.
Right.
If you're working on the front line at the food plant, you can't do that from home. I mean, if you're the one that's cleaning out the hotel, you can't do that from home. So you got somebody who's going to sit back there and say, well, this really isn't that bad a disease because I'm not catching it. Well, look where you are. You're able to isolate. But they're willing to sacrifice these people to do a job to maintain their lifestyle, but not provide any of the benefits for them. So that I'm very frustrated when I hear people talk about we're all in this together. No, some people, what is it, like the pig and the chicken with breakfast?
Right.
The chicken is interested, but the pig is committed. Well, this is what's happening to black folks right now and other folks at the lower social economic scale.
Okay, I'm going to switch paces a little bit, switch screens. You're a colon and rectal surgeon.
Yes, sir.
I know that we are affected by that also.
Yeah.
Let's talk about how colon cancer and things like that affect people of color.
At the time that we're talking, I think we're about 2 weeks out where the Black Panther, Chadwick Boseman, died from colorectal cancer. He was 44 years of age. A couple of things this points out to us. Number one, African Americans have the highest mortality or death rate from colorectal cancer of any other group in the United States. We are number one in that. And what's happening, we know that where colorectal cancer used to be a disease in people 60, 65 and above, it is dropping down to the 40s. The millennials are now one of the fastest groups with the fastest increase in mortality rate. But African Americans, we're getting the disease earlier, and it tends to be a little bit more aggressive. Now, it may not necessarily be that the disease itself is truly aggressive, but we're finding it later at more advanced stage disease. For whites in the United States, predominantly, they'll find pretty early stage disease. For African Americans, it's late stage disease. And there are two things that contribute to this. Number one, something called screening. Screening is when you're looking for a disease in an asymptomatic population where the disease has a high prevalence, and you can do something about it. So if you think about cervical cancer, women getting pap smears. Think about prostate cancer in men, getting the prostate looked at in women. Same thing in colorectal cancer. In fact, colorectal cancer is one of the best things to look at because when we screen for colorectal cancer, we can find precancerous lesions and remove them, and that prevents somebody from developing cancer down the road. This is what that movie Minority Report writ large. In that one they said you identify a criminal before they commit the crime and remove them. Well, here we can identify a problem, remove it before it goes down the road to form anything bad for us. And also, some people may have a cancer that's so early in the course, it hadn't caused them any problems. So we can get them treated. You catch something early, no problem. You don't have to worry about this, talking about somebody dying from their disease down the road. So that's number one. Number two, for some reason or another, and there are many factors, but African Americans who have symptoms aren't showing up or not being evaluated. Symptoms being bloating, abdominal pain, blood or mucus from the anus, a change in stool frequency, either increased or decreased, a sense of incomplete evacuation, and stool shape narrowing, getting smaller and or staying small. Now, these are symptoms. They're not early. They're just symptoms. That means the disease is there and causing it. So oftentimes, African Americans may go in and see the physician who may say, oh, well, you just have some hemorrhoids or you got a little GI upset. Or we don't go. We say, oh, it's probably nothing, or what I've heard so many times. So why didn't you come in? Well, I thought it was going to be cancer and I was going to die. Well, yeah, if you wait a year and a half, yeah, that's exactly what's going to happen to you. Self-fulfilling prophecy. But if you came in early, we can cure this thing. So these are the reasons why you see African Americans having the higher incidence and higher mortality rate. And the last thing I'll say about this, the reason why we have such a high incidence, our diets are terrible. They're just terrible. Across the board, talking about black folks and we're looking at, our diets just really aren't as good as what they should be. 80% of people who have colon and rectal cancer, it's acquired. In other words, it's through some environmental thing that we've been exposed to. And most of that environment is the foods we eat. We have diets high in fats, low in fruits and vegetables, and high in barbecue. These are the things that can do a person in. 20% of cases of colon and rectal cancer are related to genetics. We all have these family reunions where everybody likes to go and sit around, which is great. I think that's the most wonderful. We have to ask the question, what did Uncle Harry die? What did Aunt Harriet have that caused her to die? Because 20% of patients with colorectal cancer, there is a family history of it. So if you know you have a family history of colon cancer, definitely need to make sure that you're being screened for colon and rectal cancer, or need to make some changes in lifestyle to try to decrease your chances of getting that disease.
Well, let me ask you a question. When should we get screened? And the reason why I say that is because I hear people say, like, you should get screened when you're 40, but if you're a black man, when you're 15.
Yeah. Take no chances.
Right,
Take
right,
no chances.
Right.
Well, the screening protocols, let's look at it in terms of average risk for the development of colon cancer. That means you have no family history of colon cancer and no personal history of any diseases. It used to be said that age 50 was the starting point. And that was because we knew that people who developed polyps tended to do so in their 40s. Polyp is a benign growth that can go on to form a cancer. It generally takes about 3 to 5 years to go from normal cells to develop into a polyp about 1 centimeter in size. And then it takes another 3 to 5 years to develop a polyp about 2 centimeters in size. Now, the significance of 2 centimeters is that about 30% of those may contain a cancer. So if you're looking at someone who starts developing polyps at age 40, by the time they get to age 50, they may have something, big polyp there. But most people don't start to around 45. So that's why we said 50 was when we needed to start screening a person. Now, if they had a family member who had colon cancer, let's say that person had their colon cancer before age 50, you'd start screening them at age 40 if they had a family. Now, what about African Americans? Well, as we were just talking about a minute ago, using the example of Mr. Bozeman, African Americans seem to have our disease starting at an earlier age. So for us, the screening recommendation is at age 45. And again, if there's a family history, it's 10 years prior to the age of the youngest person who had their disease. So 45 if you're an African American, that's when we start screening for colon and rectal cancer.
Why did you get started doing this?
Well, you got to be careful, man. People say, what do you like? Well, I like butts. Well, now I got more butt than I can ever take a look at. Be careful what you ask for, man. Black folks are. They got the songs, they got everything. Anyway, so I messed up. I have always been interested in digestive tract diseases. And as a consequence of that, I really got interested in cancers. And colon and rectal cancer seemed like one of those things which we can get a handle on. We can get control. We know that there is a precancerous condition. We know that there's the cancer. There are steps in between. We know that through modification of things like diet, using some medications like even aspirin a day can help decrease a person's risk. Using some calcium supplements like taking 2 Tums a day can help. So there are things that we can do. And I'm just fascinated by it. Surgery, I'm telling you, man, I know you were the big-time basketball player and you all that. I had no game. So I wasn't going to do it through basketball. But I tell you, to operate on somebody is one of the biggest thrills and privileges I've ever had. And I can't imagine anything better than that. When you operate on somebody, they're coming to me, whoever it may be, they're coming to me and say, hey, I trust you to assault my body, take care of a problem, and then put me back together again. Now, that's a hell of a trust, man. I mean, just think about that. And when you look at a person who's on the table for surgery, their arms are outstretched, their legs are together, and they are figuratively and literally naked before the world. And the only other time I've seen that is some guys on a cross in the complete supplication saying, I trust you to do this thing. And to open somebody's belly, to this day, and I've been doing this thing, man, for 35 plus years, it still fascinates me to look at the inside of a human being, to see the intricacies and how that thing works. It's a privilege, man. It's a view that I wish everyone could have a chance. And if you ever thought that there was a difference between us all, you're looking at, there ain't no difference, man. We're all the same on the inside. And it's a real privilege for me. And it's just a gas, man. I love doing that thing.
Well, I know that you're very well. A lot of people look at you, and you have a lot of distinction. And a lot of people say a lot of great things about you. I will tell you that. And I'm so happy to have you. I'm so happy to have you as a friend as well. What can we do to get the word out about COVID, about colon cancer for people of color? What can I do through this show, whatever? What can we do just to get the word out so that you don't have to be the flag carrier the whole time by yourself?
I'm not. You're doing the show. What do we do? People, as they say, people say, do as I say, not necessarily as I do. But it's what you do that people pay the most attention to. So you're a guy that's out there. People see you, no matter whether you want to be seen or not. People see what you're doing. And if you're wearing the mask, you're maintaining the social distancing.
Because we're social distance right now.
Right now we are, yeah. I thought it was because you thought I hadn't bathed or anything, or because of my job. You think he might be carrying some poo around with him. But no, but that's the thing, man. People need to see that people are doing this. Not because you get people of privilege. Let's face it, Judge, you're a privileged man. You're not going to be treated the same way. Well, initially you may be once they find out who you are. But you could do something. You say, well, I'm the judge, therefore I don't have to do quite like you normal people do. But you do. And so everyone sees that. So there's the example. This is how we are to conduct ourselves in a civilized society, in a society where each one of us is responsible for somebody else. So if you're wearing the mask, I got to ask, well, heck, if he's wearing it, how come I'm not wearing it? Mm-hmm. If he's maintaining distancing, why can't I? Number two, your family sees what you eat, and they see what you do. Your friends say, hey, man, it's good. But you're 45 now. You're 46. What did your colonoscopy show? Because I know you went and had one done. Mm-hmm. Oh, you didn't have it? Well, let's get you. You need to call somebody. That is the way we do it. That one-to-one-to-one. And hopefully that person will, as they used to say, and so on, and so on, and so on, and so on. Let's spread that out. We can spread things through Facebook, these rumors about people, and it just goes exponentially. Same thing. Let's just put it out there. If you're 45, you haven't had your colorectal cancer screening, there's no good reason not to do it. So let's all make sure we get it done. Just keep repeating that message, people. If you're going out in public, wear the mask.
Sounds like we need to start a challenge.
I like it.
Okay, we can start a challenge here. All right. Doc, I appreciate you coming on the show today. I know that there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but I appreciate you being on the front lines and trying to tell us what we need to do. I'll be honest with you, when you first started talking, you kind of scared me a little bit because some of the things that you were saying that we needed to do, I have been doing, but I've been around a whole lot of people that have not been doing those things. So I need to speak up a little bit more to say, look, these are the recommendations, and this is what needs to be done to curb the virus the way it needs to be done. So I wanted to thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Hey.
Thank you for what you're doing with this show, by the way.
I appreciate it. We're going to figure out a way to get you back on here because I think it's very important that people understand what we are doing right now and also what we need to be doing to try and make things better for our community. So if you're okay with this, I'd love for you to come back to talk about not only where we are at that particular time, but what we need to do further to get where we need to be.
I'm sure people out there can appreciate, number one, you're younger than I am. Number two, you're bigger than I am. And number three, you're a judge. I'm going to say no. It'd be my pleasure, sir. It'd be my pleasure.
Well, how's your family doing real quick?
They're doing quite well. Thank you for asking.
Okay. Thank you once again for being here. And thank you once again for being on or listening to Matter of Perspective with Judge Derwin Webb. Come back next week where we'll have another interesting guest.